Good afternoon and welcome to today's virtual conference on deputies in schools, hosted by the Civilian Oversight Commission. I'm Danielle Butler Vappie and I'm the Interim Executive Director for the Commission. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, our commission consists of 9 board-appointed volunteers from the community and 8 county staff members who research, analyze, and provide recommendations related to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's practices, policies, and procedures. Our commission is advisory, so our recommendations are implemented at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors and the Sheriff's Department. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss school resource deputies who are sworn law enforcement officers whose duty it is to protect students and faculty and to secure the campus and improve school safety. This is the second session in a series of educational conferences on this topic. To learn more and to register for the next session, which will be on August 3rd, please visit our website at coc.lacounty.gov. Our moderator today will be Commissioner Luis S. Garcia, who leads our Quality of Life Ad Hoc Committee. This committee is gathering community feedback about the topic of deputies in schools. Commission staff is continuing to coordinate a series of roundtable conversations with various school districts, community organizations, and members of the public. If you or someone you know may be interested in participating in these roundtable discussions, please provide your experiences and thoughts about deputies in schools. Please reach out to us. You can do that at our email address, which is cocnotify@coc.lacounty.gov, or our website. We have a great panel of speakers lined up to discuss the balancing of safety and equity in deputies in schools. First, you'll hear from Gary Hardie Jr., who's the Vice President of the Lynwood Unified School District and a school board member, followed by Chelsea Elena from Neighborhood Legal Services, Los Angeles, and consultant Dr. Jaime Hernandez. Then we'll hear from Sal Arias, board member for the California School Resource Officers Association, and lastly, Cesar Sanchez, Senior Analyst for Los Angeles County's Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative, which is commonly referred to as Hardie. Finally, we invite your written public comment on this topic, which our staff and commissioners will review as they analyze the issue and assess providing recommendations to the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Supervisors. Please visit our website at coc.lacounty.gov to complete the form to provide written public comments. The deadline for submitting this form is August 7th. And now I'll turn it over to our moderator, Commissioner Luis Garcia.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you to the presenters for joining us again today. My name is Luis Garcia, and I am a member of the Civilian Oversight Commission, and I work as a statewide behavioral health consultant, helping public and private mental health and substance abuse providers to improve California's behavioral health infrastructure. I also volunteer as an associate clinical social worker where I specialize in working with people with mild to moderate mental illness. As Danielle mentioned, I lead the Commission's Quality of Life Ad Hoc Committee, so I, along with Commissioners Irma Cooper and Hans Johnson, are looking into this topic of deputies in schools. The Commission has heard public comments about the issue for years, and we've had community organizations and the Office of Inspector General provide presentations to the Commission on the topic. Now we're doing proactive outreach to learn what various stakeholders think about the topic. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department School Resource Deputy Program has contacts with various school districts to provide services on school campuses throughout Los Angeles County. Last Thursday, in the first session of the Deputies in Schools conferences, we heard about some of these incidents and the data that indicates racial profiling. Today, I hope to learn about the goals and obstacles of balancing safety and equitable treatment of students while deputies are in schools. While school resource deputies are tasked to ensure school safety, there is a debate about the impact of engagement these officers have with students. It is important to protect our children and adolescents in schools by maintaining safety and preventing tragedies. However, with several reports showing racial profiling in some schools, exploring better ways to maintain safe environments should be prioritized. In the first virtual conference on deputies in schools, background and overview last week, Kelly Fisher, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health's Office of Violence Prevention's Deputy Director, and her presentation provided a definition of school safety that I believe is useful for today's session to set the stage, frame the conversation. And it reads, school safety reflects a climate where students, families, and staff feel safe from violence, bullying, and harassment, including the influence of substance use and violence perpetrated by individuals and systems. Enhancing school safety requires addressing the root causes of violence and trauma that occur in schools, in school-related activities, and in the surrounding communities through policies and practices that strengthen the network of prevention and response services using an equity and healing-centered lens. This panel today will discuss the fine line between maintaining safety in schools and improving equity among students, touching on areas of concern, best practices for staffing and engagement, and specific steps to expand equity. And like we do at each of our conferences, we will have a question and answer session after panelists' presentations. So if you have any questions that come up, raise your hand on WebEx to get into the queue. And now, turning it over to today's speakers. Although we told you the names and titles of the speakers, I invite each of you to introduce yourself, including your preferred pronouns and a little bit about your background if you wish. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our first speaker, Lynwood Unified School District School Board member, Gary Hardie Jr. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Luis. I was actually hoping to go last, but we'll go first today. As I mentioned, my name is Gary Hardie Jr., Vice President of the Lynwood Unified School District Board of Education. Going into my 10th year of service in office in the city of Lynwood, where I was born and raised, and attended Lynwood schools from preschool to high school, and then immediately started serving the district as a volunteer and an intern right after high school, and was elected at the age of 26 in 2014. Really appreciate the time to share with you the Lynwood story and our approach to this issue. It has been an issue that I've been speaking to ad nauseum for the last 3 years, and I'm happy to get into some of the weeds as far as what it looks like. So first, I'll start with some data about Lynwood. So you can go to the next slide, please. So here are our student demographics. We have about 12,000 students across 22 school sites in Lynwood. You see our racial makeup here, which is important as we have often seen Black and Brown students disproportionately impacted by school discipline policies, and our 90 free and reduced lunch percentage sort of tells you which percentage of families fall below the level of poverty in Lynwood. Next slide. So as I shared, I was born and raised in Lynwood, attended Lynwood schools, and one of the things that made me run for office was this number right here. When I was in school, our graduation rate was about 50%. I graduated in 2005, and it had a lot to do with the lack of resources, but also the mindset and expectations set for our students when I was a school kid there. And I remember vividly the first day of school, freshman year, being told that half of us wouldn't make it to senior year. And true enough, half of us didn't make it to senior year, and only half of us graduated from high school. And that was true of our district for many years, which sort of was the North Star for our engagement and our work to improve the outcome for students. Next slide. So fast forward to 2009, 2019 year was right before COVID. Our last, I'll call normal year. We go from 50% to 94% at Lynwood High School and 97%. And the story that I'll tell you today is sort of how we invested in the outcomes we wanted for students and how that sort of related to the deployment of resources, including campus safety officers as well. Next slide, please. So our focus in equity, right? We hear this word talked about quite a bit, but most often people are confusing it with equality. But we understood as equity in Lynwood, meaning that we are meeting the individualized and specific needs of all kids, and also the specific needs of our community and what our students need in order to succeed. So that led the board to take a myriad of actions. We had to believe that equity was our belief from the top to the bottom and from the bottom up, and we all had work to do to ensure our students saw equity in their education. So that meant we founded an equity division, one of the first in the state of California prior to the term of equity being popularized. It meant that we no longer tracked students, so you weren't put in a class because you were gay at honors or AP or special needs. We had our students so heterogeneously mixed, and we found great impact as far as the data there. We looked at college and career preparation. As I mentioned, when I was a student in school, college was sort of the exception for kids, and we now made it sort of the byproduct for our system, meaning that if your kids wanted to go to college, we would prepare them to, and if they didn't, then that was their choice, not because we weren't preparing them or equipping them to do so. Next slide. So here's a little more on our strategic plan in equity. And one of the things that I'm going to sort of bring it down to the conversation around is our health collaborative that we put in place. Next slide. Let's go 2 more. So you can see here some of the A through G completion rates, that sort of college readiness. One more slide. And one more. I think that should be it. While the slides are advancing, the topic today is resource deputies, and of course, for many districts like mine, our budget is not infinite. We don't have billions of dollars, but we have a great need, and our need far exceeds our budgetary capacity. So what we did is start to build up our health collaborative partners to address student need. And what we found is that looking at our discipline data, that a lot of the discipline issues we were finding were a result of unmet need. Next slide, please. Should be slide, I think 13 or 14. Keep going. So we go back one. All right, sorry about that. So with our slide, the one before this one, please. One more. Sorry about that. All right, I'll just keep going. So in essence, so one of the things we did in Lynwood is to ensure that all students had equity and access to what they needed to succeed. Again, we didn't want our system in Lynwood to deselect students from success. So one example of that is our AP college courses. We found that previously students had to go through a myriad of hoops and prerequisites in order to take an AP course. What we did was we removed that barrier for students and allow them to take an AP course if they so choose to. And that led to the increased passage rates for our students, and also the increased number of students taking AP courses. And in 2017, we were awarded the National AP District of the Year Award for our efforts in the area. One more slide. In addition, this is some of our cohort graduation rates. So that means over the 4-year segments measuring these data, and we're sort of seeing the trend go higher and higher to further support the fact that we were doing the right thing as far as the efforts we were taking to support student outcomes and student learning. Now, bringing it to this conversation about campus safety officers, the decision to cancel the contract with the Sheriff's Department came in 2020. Again, before the idea was sort of popularized and of sort of pop culture. We did it because we had saw the data, as some of which I shared with you today, making the point that we were doing the right thing to focus on prevention and readiness, as opposed to the officers that we had that were sort of in a wait and see mode, unfortunately. Not something they were doing wrong, but we just had a situation where we were doing more to prevent the need for campus response as far as for police officers, and looking at things to address those resources elsewhere. So in 2020, we decided to cancel that contract, which is about $250,000, I'm sorry, and fund a 24/7 mental health hotline. We funded a 24/7 tutoring hotline, and also provided resources for our teachers and staff as well. In addition to that, we expanded our PBIS program district-wide. That is a positive behaviors interventions and supports program. We went from 3 schools of 22 being awarded state awards for PBIS to all 22. And one school that I'll point out is Lincoln Elementary School, who at the time had about 400 students, and about we partnered with a program called Vision to Learn. Vision to Learn provides free glasses for students in need, regardless of their income. And of all the 400 students at that school, 300 needed glasses. And in 2 years, that school went from a bronze PBIS award winning school to a platinum PBIS award winning school. So again, we found that the data that we are looking at to measure student outcomes found that our prevention efforts made a huge impact in discipline records to ensure that we were doing the right thing as far as that concerned. What we also did is we created a Safe Schools Collaborative. What the Safe School Collaborative did, it brought together all stakeholders within the district, from parents, students, teachers, campus safety, the sheriff's department, business, and faith leaders as well. And our goal was to meet monthly to address student safety concerns in and around their community and in and around our school. This collaborative is award-winning as of last month in June, being awarded a national award for our efforts and impact on student safety. And the goal was really to address any blind spots or any concerns, have a body sort of like an oversight commission to address any issues that we foresaw, but also to be proactive and ensuring that we have the proper training, the proper equipment, and have the proper response to any incidents that did show up as a result of behavior or the issues in the community. And one thing that I will say is that we definitely had a myriad of issues. No district is impervious to issues, but the reason why this task force was important is because we had the appropriate response and we were adequately prepared. So what that meant is that our task force addressed things like school shooter safety drills. We addressed emergency kits in classrooms. We addressed teacher training, and we addressed our ability and our need to respond to any threats that we might find in the community. In addition to recommending to the board that we adopted a weapons detection system and a software that will detect any threats, credible or not, and employ a response team if we found any social media threats. And there were a few threats that we did find on social media. We were able to activate our district teams with the LA Sheriff's Department, FBI, to do searches and secure weapons and prevent any incidents from happening on campus. So what I want to underscore, I'm sorry the slides didn't quite cooperate with my comments today, but what I want to underscore is that in Lynwood, we found that prevention and readiness are the answer to ensuring student safety and ensuring that each student had the resources that they needed to thrive, and that we met the individualized and specific needs of students by employing equity, access, and justice for all kids, and ensuring that we understand that student need is paramount in the way that we do business. And the last thing that I'll share is that in the slide you sort of saw that over the last 10 years, we increased the number of our health collaborative partners, because our goal is to make sure that each student is ready when they come to our campus to learn and focus on what kids should be caring about, and that's their education. So our goal is to ensure that we have every type of resource possible and needed for our students and their families, that our staff is trained to refer and identify students that show need, and that we're able to address any issues on the front end while being able to respond to issues that inevitably happen on the back end with the proper response and approach structure for our district. What we find is that in education, most often, this is my 10th year in education, I've seen a myriad of cases come before the board for suspension and a couple for expulsion. We find that many times these issues are a result of unmet need. So that means we had to have a system in place to meet the need, to understand the needs, and to adequately approach student learning in a way that is good for all kids. So if I summarize my remarks in one sentence, is that the goal of education should be to build strong young people. And if we do so, we won't have to work on preparing or repairing broken adults, as Frederick Douglass said. So that's been our focal point and our way forward. I'm happy to answer any questions of anything that I needed to clarify that the slide sort of didn't answer in my remarks. But again, the data that we show from when I was in school, from 50% graduation rate to the high 90s, is a result of our investment in student outcome. And at the end of the day, in 2020, we found that our resources were better used in investing in prevention and readiness, as opposed to our current iteration, whereas we had officers that were most often responding to issues in the community than responding to issues on our school sites. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gary. Next, we'll hear from Salvador Arias, who is the California School Resource Officers Association's board member. Please go ahead, Gary. Salvador, sorry.
Thank you, Luis. Man, that's a hard gig to follow there with Gary, man. I love what you're doing out there, man. A lot of good stuff. My name is Sal Arias. I'm also a school board member, actually, but my number one job is I'm a principal. My background is school social worker. I'm also, like Luis, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I wear numerous hats. I've been in education for 15 plus years. Prior to that, I was in probation. I worked for probation for 5 years, and I was in the Marine Corps prior to that. And prior to that, I was actually student at Los Angeles Unified School District. So I came from those areas. We do have, I'm in an alternative education school setting. So students who come to us, they come to us because they've been suspended, expelled. They have had those negative school experiences, and they're like kind of going back to what Gary mentioned. There's a lot of needs that our students come to our campus, but at the same time, they're also come with besides the needs. We have a lot of gang involved youth on our campus, and with that comes a lot of dangers to our sites. We are a single campus community school that serves the entire Bakersfield area. We're not as big as Los Angeles, but we're a pretty big city, and all the gangs feed into our schools, which, as you guys know, that, gangs bring their own street issues and then bring them onto our campus. So one of the things that we were able to do is partner with the Bakersfield City Police Department, and they provided to us a school resource officer. And that what I love about our school resource officer is that, number one, he's been a school resource officer for numerous years. He's also, we're fortunate enough because he's getting his doctorates in psychology. And so his mindset is so different. He's all about mentoring, supporting our students, and he provides a lot of presence. When our students come here, they get dropped off or picked up. They bring sometimes some things that are dangerous to our campus, and just having the presence of the vehicle parked in the front, that tends to deter a lot of the issues. Since that campus police has been on our campus, you just see the incidence has just declined. We really didn't have much control of what occurred out there. Outside of our campus, we will hear things happening in the alleys, kids getting fights, drugs happening, guns being hidden here and there. That has just gone to a minimum because what our police officer does, he patrols the alleys. He interacts with the community members. Our community members around used to always complain, your kids, always. What are you guys going to do about your kids? Your kids are always doing this. Your kids are smoking weed over here. They're doing this stuff over here. And since having that campus police on, we still get some, but not as many. And when I say many, we're talking reduction of about 90%. And then when the kids see our campus police, he has built such a great rapport with them, that they don't see him as the cop, as a cop, even though our kids has experienced that those things with officers in their neighborhoods. Our officer is so welcoming to them. He's not here to arrest them. I don't think he's ever arrested anybody on our campus. He's just here. Like we used to have people come through our campus to just speed. We used to have parents fight out there because, our parents were sometimes gang involved, and their big old riots break out there. And, we had gang riots. I mean, it was ridiculous prior to our campus police being here. And all that has been deterred. It's a lot of things that we cannot control that happen out in the community. But, having that officer on campus has just been a tremendous support for us. It really has. And, like I mentioned, I'm totally with Gary in regards to PBIS and MTSS and restorative practice. We do all those things. But unfortunately, some of those things that, because of the neighborhoods that these kids come from, it's hard to implement those things because, the rivalries exist beyond almost repair that what we can do with the limited time that we have on our campus. So safety is a big concern for us. It's a big concern, and we would definitely want to make sure we deter any gang violence or any violence coming to our campus, and just having that officer present and being able to patrol and be welcoming and be a great consultant, because sometimes we have to. I'm a school administrator. I'm a principal here. And, I have to consult with them because sometimes we have some things that happen, and he's a great consultant. I'll ask him questions like, hey, you know, this happened on my campus. What do you suggest? Is this a reportable thing? It's like, no, don't. This is not a reportable thing. You know, go ahead and do this first, and then we'll look into it. So he's a great consultant for me. You know, he provides a lot of good information, and it's just amazing to have him here. He's part of our PBIS, believe it or not, part of our PBIS team member. Again, going back to our officer, you know, he is just a different guy. You know, he's such a mentor. Number one thing that he does for our kids, he mentors them. You know, even when there's fights or things like that, you know, he really doesn't get involved. He stays back there. You know, he's really never jumps in. He stays there. If something gets out of hand, he definitely, you know, will come and support us. But our campus supervisors are primary. So our primary is campus supervisors. We have numerous school social workers on our campus. So we do provide, you know, going back to what Gary was mentioning, there are a lot of needs. Or, you know, COVID really kicked our butts, and our kids are coming back with a lot of, you know, social emotional needs, and having those mental health services on our campus are really instrumental in, you know, providing those needs for our students, and really, you know, supporting them, because there are a lot of needs. And then, you know, with the community schools grant, we've been able to bring in a lot of other resources, you know, food pantries and different things onto our campuses to provide those supports for our students. You know, so I'm really appreciative of our school resource officer that we have here on campus. He's just an additional great resource for us. You know, and what I love about him also is that he knows when he needs to get involved in, and he knows when not to, because last thing he wants to do is criminalize any of our students. So definitely a plus for us. And then one of the things is, you know, question that I see here is this: what is our district process for handling situations here? So our situation is, number one is, you know what, just like any PBIS, MTSS, it starts with the teacher, you know, good classroom management skills. Then if our campus supervisor needs to step in, they'll step in, along with our school social worker, our AmeriCorps mentor. And then things, if I have to get involved as an administrator, I'll come in and get involved as an administrator. And the last resort is definitely a school resource officer, you know, last resort. But they're not the first people on call. You know, we as educators, because these are our students, this is our campus. But he's definitely here to provide supports for us. So, you know, that's all I have. If you guys have any questions, please ask me later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sal. Now we'll hear from Chelsea Helena. Please take it away, Chelsea.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsea Elena. With me, I have Dr. Jaime Hernandez, and we're here to discuss referrals to school resource deputies in the Antelope Valley Union High School District. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Like I said, my name is Chelsea Elena. I supervise Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County's Education Rights Practice. And our practice was started to focus almost exclusively on representing students and families in the Antelope Valley in disputes with school districts related to special education, school discipline, and school policing. And I will let my co-panelist Jaime introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jaime Hernandez. I am the consultant that was brought in to investigate some of the allegations, in particular the ones related to the SROs in students with disabilities.
You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So Jaime and I are here today to discuss findings we made following a 2-year-long investigation into the Antelope Valley Union High School District, which included, among other things, an investigation into the sheriff's role on Antelope Valley campuses. Antelope Valley is a region that has one high school district that all public school students eventually cycle through. There are also several smaller elementary school districts that serve kids in K-8. There are multiple districts in this region that have either formal contracts or sort of informal understandings with the sheriff's department that lead to daily contact for K-12 students with sheriff's deputies. In May of 2023, Disability Rights California published Dr. Jaime Hernandez 400+ page report that was commissioned by us, Disability Rights California, Equal Justice Society, and a private law firm, Kilpatrick, Townsend, and Stockton, to independently validate a series of complaints that our organizations made to the California Department of Education about evidence that our investigation found of pervasive race and disability discrimination in Antelope Valley Union High School District on both the part of the district and the school resource deputies that are stationed on every one of its campuses. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. The investigation came about after our practice witnessed, through directly working with and representing students in the community, really harsh and disparate treatment by the Sheriff's Department in Antelope Valley schools and in the region more broadly. Next slide. Further, our organization had already analyzed and reported on LASD data made available by the Racial Identity and Profiling Act that found that LASD's policing practices disproportionately targeted students in communities of color. Go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things that our report showed when we mapped the data and layered it over demographic indicators within the region, if you look at these maps, it is sort of hard to see at this size, but the darker area a region is, the more saturated it is with non-white communities. Of this 20 census blocks that had the highest contact rates in the region, 9 of them contained or directly bordered a K-12 school, with the area that had by far the highest contact rate being Antelope Valley High School. Blocks containing K-12 schools are shown in purple. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to show this chart really quickly just because it's important for the findings and recommendations that Dr. Hernandez is going to discuss today. But this chart shows the racial breakdown in Antelope Valley K-12 schools. This breakdown is almost identical to the one that exists within the high school district. So it's a good one to remember for reference when we're discussing disproportionality in the next couple of slides. As you can see, Black students represent about 18% of the K-12 population. White students are about 12.5%. Troublingly, according to LASD's own RIPA data, the vast and disproportionate majority of K-12 contacts with LASD are going to Black students. Indeed, Black students receive more LASD contacts from school police than all other students, races and ethnicities combined. This should give you like a really basic understanding of how Black students are being targeted in Antelope Valley schools. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the complaint that we filed, that my team and I filed, had 8 allegations that were related to the Sheriff's Department, the Department of Probation, and the district's campus security. We've included the allegations in this presentation that relate to LASD directly, as opposed to the district or another agency. We will go through the findings for each, so no need to read them all carefully now. And go ahead and go to the next slide. And Jaime will take you through his findings.
Like Chelsea mentioned, I was brought in to investigate various allegations regarding students with disabilities in the Antelope Valley Unified School District. These are related to law enforcement contacts or referrals, as well as restraints, citations, and arrests. Now, before I begin to go through these slides, I want you to understand that a lot of this data and these findings are due to a combination of various data sources. So I think that it's really important to understand that a lot of districts lack the systematic data recording mechanisms to ensure that they accurately know when students have contacts with SROs, as well as when they are restrained. So let me give you some examples from what we found. The district was required to produce data reports or spreadsheets for all of their law enforcement referrals for both gen ed students and special education students. Their list included 194 contacts. I found going through different various sources such as expulsion packets, different suspension notice forms were one major source. I was able to find 354 contacts where students had been referred to an SRO. And many of these came from a suspension notice form that schools use. However, we were not able to get suspension notice forms for all schools, or all schools did not produce complete records for the entire year. So there's more out there. And I begin with that because I think it's important to first identify the extent of the problem to better understand how disproportionality impacts certain groups. So as I mentioned, I found 83% more law enforcement contacts than were reported by the district, and presumably more than were probably known by the district as an aggregate. Maybe schools knew about these contacts, but the central office were likely not to have known. They also provided a list of students who were removed. These are students who were not only arrested, but removed from their campuses, and this requires a different kind of reporting. The district provided a list of 27 students. I was able to identify 34 students that had actually been removed. And of the 27 on their list, 20 of those students did not show up on the law enforcement referral list. So again, I think it's really critical to examine the district sources and really look at other sources when first trying to get a baseline of what the extent of the problem is in terms of law enforcement referrals, because that matters for disproportionality. Now, as you see here, the investigation really focused on students with disabilities, but in order to look at disproportionality, we also had to look at gen ed kids. General ed students, Black general ed students, were 3.68 times more likely to be referred to law enforcement. For special education students, pardon me, 3.68 times more likely than any other student, right? Then for special education students, Black special ed students were 4.71 times more likely to be referred than any other special ed student that's non-Black. So what this means is that for both gen ed and special ed, students with and without disabilities, Black students are being disproportionately targeted in terms of these law enforcement referrals. As you can see here on the slide, Black students made up 61% of Black students with disabilities made up 61% of the referrals, with students with disabilities now making up about 43% when their overall enrollment is 17%. If you can go to the next slide, please. Similarly, when we looked at arrest, Black students with disabilities were disproportionately arrested compared to special ed students and general ed students, as well as, I mentioned the students taken into custody. There it is, 60% of the students, of those 27 that were reported as having been taken into custody, 60% were Black students with disabilities, and for non-disabled students, Black students again made up the majority of these students, with 50% of them having been removed and taken into custody. When I looked at the restraints, now I do want to qualify this next bullet by saying these restraints were not solely restraints conducted by SROs. These were restraints conducted by primarily campus security officers, and 3 out of 4 of these restraints were carried out on Black students with disabilities. We did not have very complete data on general ed restraints. This includes handcuffing, by the way, and many of these instances were instances of students being handcuffed by CSOs and SROs. Next slide, please. So I was able to review suspension notice forms, again, for the majority of the schools, and both gen ed and special education students. And on the suspension notice form, there's a checkbox that indicates when students were referred to law enforcement. And in reviewing each and every one of these cases, I found many that were minor infractions that became escalated And de-escalation resulted in some instances in students both being restrained, handcuffed, and then arrested. The high number of law enforcement referrals is indicative of reliance on SROs for school disciplinary action. And this is what was very clear when I was able to review all of the suspension notice forms. Again, there's some analysis on the types of infractions that were done, but many of them started with minor infractions that should have been or could have been handled appropriately with administration or other school personnel, but that it resulted in SRO involvement that resulted in the student being suspended, handcuffed, arrested. Next slide, please. So the next allegation, again, I think the qualifier here is both LASD, so the Sheriff's Department, and campus security were the focus of these, the individuals carrying out these restraints on Black students with disabilities, but it was primarily carried out to Black students with disabilities, 3 out of 4, as mentioned earlier. There's no really, I found no evidence of any systematic investigation or process for investigating or looking into the use of force, including the restraints on part of the district or the SROs. And I think that's important because these practices are being carried on with very little scrutiny, and even to the consequence. So even when students with disabilities are restrained, there's a requirement that the school personnel report if students were injured or staff were injured. And even in those instances, it did not appear that they were looking into the use of force when these injuries occurred. Next slide, please. So one of the recommendations I made, the district had a basic contract with the Sheriff's Department, and the research literature is very clear that one of the main components of an SRO contract should be a memorandum of understanding that defines and limits the scopes of SRO responsibilities and mandates, relevant training, program evaluation, and oversight mechanisms. So a sound MOU should have something that requires SROs to be trained for working with students with disabilities, understanding disability, understanding de-escalation techniques, crisis intervention for youths, as well as having some form of oversight that looks into these practices and whether the use of force was excessive or not. Next slide, please. And as recommended by both the legislature and research, districts should be prioritizing PBIS, counseling, and other mental health supports over these campus security and SRO programs. And that was one of my recommendations to the district. As I heard Gary say, a lot of these instances of misconduct or student behavior are because of unmet needs. And there's a lot of evidence of students both academically and socially performing very low in Antelope Valley. And one of the recommendations is to really try to focus more on those unmet needs and less on including an SRO program that involves discipline that's really resulting in the criminalization of such behaviors. Next slide, please.
That's a wrap. Apologies for going a few minutes over. If you would like copies of these reports that were mentioned in our presentation, I sent them to the COC, and I'm happy to send them directly to you if you message me directly.
Thank you, Chelsea and Dr. Hernandez. And now we'll hear from Assessor Sanchez. Please take it away, Cesar.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cesar Sanchez, and I am with Hardie, which stands for the Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative. And if we can go to the next slide, I would like to kind of frame this conversation a little bit under the equity lens and try to explain some of those topics. I'm sure many of us in this space are very familiar, but for some of us, it's important to explain. So if we can go to the next slide. This is just about the LA County and how the Hardie team was established in July 2020, soon after the killing of George Floyd. The Board of Supervisors passed a motion that created the board's 8th board-directed priority known as the Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion. And the board motion boldly articulated the anti-racist agenda that will guide, govern, and increase the county's ongoing commitment to fighting racism in all its dimensions. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just to define a couple of concepts, equity is, it acknowledges that everyone comes from different places. We don't all come from the same country, from the same region of the county. We don't come from the same financial stability or situation. And those differences and backgrounds make a difference, and they really are important, and they need to be acknowledged. Also, equality is the idea that each individual group of people is treated the same, given the same resources, or expected to take advantage of the same opportunities. And looking at these two concepts, I think if we can go to the next slide, we can see how they compare and contrast to each other. We cannot expect to have a one-size-fits-all approach, especially, in context of today's conversation for the SRO and the campus safety officers and the roles in the schools. It should really be customized by the community, by each district, and by each school through a series of conversations between community members, students, the SROs themselves, to be able to come up with solutions that will lead eventually in the future to equal outcomes, but through a process of equity. And as we can see in these images at the bottom, with equality, and we have one approach for everybody, an activity is not possible for a group of people, but it is possible for someone else. For example, high school graduation, for example, or being able to thrive, to be able to take advantage of some opportunities. You do need to have a system that accommodates certain people based on their needs. If we can go to the next slide. So the vision for Hardie is LA County is a place where all residents are healthy, experience justice, and thrive. And our mission is to end structural racism and its consequences in LA County. Next slide, please. So to speak a little bit about concentrated and intergenerational disadvantage that, for example, not being able to graduate from high school, or being have a criminal record, for example, that is something that speaks to local, state, and federal policies. And that creates a cycle that is intergenerational. It affects stagnant educational attainment in the future that leads to declining of employment and earning opportunities, which leads to the growth of disadvantaged families. And the cycle continues to be perpetuated if it's not addressed. And, I do really appreciate this conversation today, because it is an attempt at, being actionable and doing something to break this cycle. Can we go to the next slide? So what is structural racism? There are 3 pillars of structural racism, and it is institutional, it is spatial, like regional, depending on what school, like we said, or what community, and it is relational. They are not independent, but each element of structural racism, it affects another. It's a system, and it is a social processes by which structural racism produces durable inequality. For example, exclusion, exploitation. People usually with not being able to take advantage of educational opportunities are usually in positions where they're exploited and controlled. And The first consequence is this leads to disparities in the life course outcomes. As we can see here, there's a few bullet points such as education, employment, income, housing, health, wealth, crime, incarceration, and death. And these are all indicators of how people are going to be able to thrive in their environment. And it also creates, as it has been mentioned before, disparities that are generational. If we can go to the next slide. So I would like to share with everybody that in a very timely fashion, about 2 weeks ago, July 11th to be precise, the LA County Board of Supervisors approved a racial strategic plan. And it was co-created with residents, community-based organizations, civic leaders, just through a process of community engagement. And we have 5 main strategic goals, which some of which are related to this conversation today, which is increased attainment of post-secondary credentials with significant labor market value, reduce adult first-time felony convictions, increase stable full-time employment among individuals so they can be above the 250% federal poverty level, and reduce infant mortality. If we can achieve these goals, we can really make an impact through equity to achieve equal outcomes. Can we go to the next slide? I'm sorry, can we go back a slide just quickly? I would like to call your attention to the QR code. If anyone in this call would like to learn more about our racial equity strategic plan, you can use that QR code and read more about it. Thank you. Next slide, please. So about opportunities for program feedback in terms of SRO, if we can go to the next slide. I believe that community engagement is actually something that can be very powerful. We have a lot of conversations among experts and amongst people that are really knowledgeable. And we tend sometimes to come to the community and say, you know, we have brainstorm and we'll present to you the solution. When in reality, we should take the opportunities to co-create solutions with community. And how do we do that though? Many times we can make a survey and place it somewhere where it's not very accessible, and maybe it's only in English. It is not promoted in communities that we know historically do not provide feedback. And can we go back to sharing the slide, please? Just 1 second. Thank you. So we do need to be strategic about it. And we need to also show community members that we have taken the feedback and how that has actually been taken into consideration, and how the feedback has served as information to have strategies around what we're hearing from community members. And something that I would like to share, and thank you for the opportunity. Do we have a few minutes for me to just share this Equity Explorer tool? Thank you very much. Just give me 1 second, and I would like to share my screen and show everybody this tool, which can be instrumental for understanding our communities. This is the Equity Explorer tool. And are you able to see my screen? Thank you. So this was developed by LA County, primarily by Hardie, and it's available for everybody. I have given the link to this tool to the moderator for this call. But if we want to understand communities in terms of different layers, we can see, for example, tracks for utilization of CalFresh, historical redlining, homeless counts, household characteristics by disability, which was mentioned earlier in this conversation, foreign-born population tracks, health insurance, status, internet access, households that have a limited English proficiency, rent or own predominance. As you can see, there's many different variables that you can look into through these tools. And when you initially go into this website, it will give you the COVID vulnerability recovery track, but you can turn that off actually. And let's say if you wanted to see, for example, limited English, you can see a map. You can download this data, and this is just one example of how we can understand the needs of our community a little bit better before we design strategies on defining the role of safety officers in the schools. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Cesar.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the speakers here today for providing the information related to deputies in schools. This was a great conversation. Building on last week's session, I can appreciate each of the panelists' perspectives, and these conversations may help to bridge the gap. We hope to build relationships and gather this insight to influence the Commission's perspective on this complex topic. Before we jump into questions from the public, and we have like about 10 minutes, I'd like to ask the panelists a few questions. And I'd like to start off with Sal. In terms of the association, how does the can you explain a little bit how the association interfaces, like here in LA County, with school districts?
You know what? That's a good question, and I don't have an answer, unfortunately, for you, Luis, because that'll be more of an Eric question. I know what the CSROA. I don't know if you ever met Wayne Sakamoto. He's one of the original founders of it. He interacted a lot with Riverside, Temecula area. I don't know how much interaction he had with the LA County,
Okay.
providing their services there. So.
Okay, so thank you. So I'm kind of going to you said you were a principal at an alternative school?
Yes.
Okay, and if I heard correctly, is the school resource officer only at that alternative school, or is it other schools in the district as well?
Well, we're one campus, one big campus here, so we serve K to 12. So we have 3 actual campuses on this perimeter. So we have a court school, which we have is probation ran. We have a all day, every day classroom setting for 9 through 12. Then we have another campus for junior high and our elementary, and for our independent students, high school students. So we have like different campuses on sites, but the SRO serves only the community side. The court school side is served by probation department.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And from what it sounds like this particular school resource deputy or officer has a good rapport, and I would imagine he's had a myriad of trainings, to work with the youth and or the adolescents. What are some of the trainings that
You know what? Some of the trainings that the officer, number one, he's been doing this for a long time. He came from the neighborhood as well. He has a humongous heart to serve our student population. And he's received trauma-informed practices, restorative practices, de-escalation, of course. He's also received the 40 developmental assets. I think the whole department's received that. Any SRO has received that. So their role is more about, serving, as a mentor on our campus than anything else. They also, receive a lot of, all our staff receive mental health training on a regular basis, because, like going back to what everybody's been saying, there's a lot of needs, and the needs of the students are very complex. And so everybody receives from suicide prevention to, your mental health 101 trainings that our social workers provide on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Now my next question will be for Gary. and it was, hearing where Lynwood is at, and, understanding, some of the larger community issues that are happening in the city. You touched on the unmet needs and how the school district is addressing these with this model that you've implemented in the schools. Within that context, how does the school principal, like the vice principal, and if there's like school security, how do they interface with, like de-escalating a situation that otherwise wouldn't be going to a school resource?
Right. So it's really an all hands on deck approach, and that's sort of a sort of spinoff of the school Safe Schools Task Force, where everyone sort of has an invested interest in student outcomes. So on the campus, the principal sets expectations for student behavior, and that is supported by teachers, by campus safety monitors, our campus safety officers, which are our unarmed campus school safety officers as well, PBIS coaches, SEL coaches, counselors, and the like. So we really sort of deputize, for lack of better terms, everybody on campus to support positive student behavior and to respond if necessary. What we found in our schools is that we had 2 school deputies, and both deputies were deputies that faced issues with discipline elsewhere and were placed in our school, and they weren't in alignment with our beliefs and our outcomes and our mission for our school. So oftentimes they were working contrary to what we wanted to see for our students, and were not trained in any type of de-escalation tactics, didn't have an SEL approach, but our staff did. So we understood that we needed to build a plan where everyone sort of played a part in building relationships and rapport, that all students had an advocate on campus and some safe space to be. And if there was an incident that existed outside of our control, for example, if there may have been a weapon that was found and we needed to call in law enforcement, we found that they were better suited to respond to those incidents, as opposed to 99% of the incidents that we found were, as I mentioned earlier, a result of unmet needs. So the challenge is, again, in hearing Mr. Arias mention that his deputy was trained in all these different approaches to student behavior, our deputies were the exact opposite, where they may have been referred to our district because they weren't able to cut it on the beat. They were sent to us. So we found that the deputies oftentimes escalated situations as opposed to de-escalation. So again, to answer your question, again, it's an all hands on deck approach. Our methodology is around prevention and the appropriate response, because I can tell you from even personal experience, I had an incident in school where in some schools the police would have been called, but instead I had a teacher that cared enough to have a conversation and found out that I had unmet needs at home that were showing up at school, and I got the support that I needed. So we don't want to have that happen as a system in our district, and we make sure that we invest in what works. And if I would have added another slide to my deck, it would have showed suspension rates, absenteeism decreasing as we increase services, as we increase health collaborative partners, as we employed SEL coaches, as we retrained our campus safety officers and campus aides. We saw the outcomes that we want to see being precipitated in that. And again, it's really about deploying resources where they are most needed and most effective, and that's been our approach.
Thank you. My next question I have is for Dr. Hernandez and Chelsea, if you may have some feedback in terms of your recommendations that you provided to the school district in Antelope Valley. Was there a response to to these recommendations?
I will let Chelsea actually take that.
Okay.
There hasn't been. We sent a letter to their board of trustees and gave them several months to respond. They did not. So we ended up filing a lawsuit against them, alleging race and disability discrimination in school discipline, policing, and some aspects of special education. And that was filed in May.
Okay. So, in the interest of time, I'd like to thank you all for your diverse presentations. I think they've been very helpful, And as we move forward to the next portion of this conference, and I'd like to open this up to the live question and answer portion. Jennifer, are there any questions for the panelists from the community?
Yes, we do have a couple of folks who have raised their hands already. As a reminder, if you are logged into the WebEx to ask a question, please raise your hand. If you have called in, please press *3 to get in the queue to be unmuted. I will unmute you when it's your turn so that you can ask your question. If your question is for a specific panelist, please feel free to state that. To ask your question, you must be logged into WebEx or phoned into the meeting. If you are commenting on Facebook Live video, your question may be read out loud by the host. And before we begin, we will have a quick announcement in Spanish. Eric, if you could go ahead.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. Si ha iniciado la conferencia por WebEx y gustaría hacer una pregunta, por favor haga clic en la imagen de la mano y alguien le ayudará. Si está escuchando la conferencia por teléfono y quiere hacer una pregunta, por favor presione *3 y alguien le ayudará cuando sea su turno. Si está viendo la conferencia en vivo por Facebook y ha escrito un comentario o pregunta, la anfitriona lo va a leer al grupo. Por fin, si su pregunta es para un panelista específico, por favor indique eso al comienzo de su pregunta. Gracias.
Wonderful, thank you. And just as a reminder, this is not a public comment, so we will not have a timer on the screen. This is for question and answers. So Sanders, you are unmuted. If you can go ahead with your question.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking my question, and my comment. My name is Paulette. I am a resident here in Lancaster. My son, who wasn't disabled and still is at the time, he attended one of the high schools here in Lancaster, and he was treated unhumanly. And I am one of the parents that has the suspension forms that you guys are lacking. And I would definitely like to be a part of, if you guys create a new lawsuit, a part of that as well. I'm a founder of an organization, just so happened to be founded in Long Beach, but God willing, he moved me here. And definitely these services of stopping pressure on teens is needed here desperately. It's breaking the chain of youth and teen incarceration by building healthy relationships with our first responders, and then helping those who did get a juvenile number get certified training skills. Also, I am an Antelope Valley Task Force member, newly created Los Angeles County Department of Youth Development Department member, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to help, and just wanted to get that out there. If I can also get you, Jamie, or Mr. You, Chelsea, and you, Mr. Hernandez, information, that would be greatly appreciated. Can you share that in the chat, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Sanders. So if you would like to send an email to cocnotify@coc.lacounty.gov, we'll make sure that your email is shared with the folks that you mentioned. Did you have a question, Sanders?
Yes, I did. I wanted to ask Mr. Arias, what schools do you support? And that was the only question I had.
Hi, thank you for your question. You know what? CSROA is willing to support any school district that reaches out to them. You know what? They provide, just like we said earlier, our officers are trained in trauma-informed, responses, mental health, youth development, like you mentioned, and numerous other things, de-escalation techniques. So, they're willing to support anybody who is looking for that type of training. They not only provide it for, deputies and officers, but they definitely provided to, I believe, being the first responders on their campus, it's going to be your campus supervisors. So they provide a lot of training to them, de-escalation, awareness, different things. So if you're interested, definitely, I can put you in contact with the executive director of CSROA, and you guys can coordinate those type of trainings.
And as a reminder, if you are an attendee logged on and you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand on the screen. You can also send a chat to the host and we can read your question out loud. We do have a question that was sent in by Rachel, and it relates to the recommendations. So Chelsea and Jaime, this would be for you. They are asking if there's any questions that go directly into hiring. She said, I'd want someone with significant experience working with adolescents in schools as a teacher or an aide or something of the like. So I don't know if you have any questions or any comments related to your recommendations and hiring.
I think that's one of the keys to having a well-defined memorandum of understanding is clearly defining the qualities and characteristics of the individuals you want to hire as in your SRO or CSO program. And again, absent that, you're really leaving it all to the sheriff's department who are hiring these folks and placing. And as Gary's, example pointed out, you may not get that individual that's either trained or really in the place to serve students with disabilities or students in general, I should say.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that we oftentimes didn't have the ability to select our officers and or had feedback about officers go unaddressed. So I think that is a challenge to ensuring that from a system standpoint that there is some feedback from a school board or district administration about the officers that would be utilized. That, again, if a district is deciding to utilize SROs as opposed to other means. So that was one of the driving factors or reasons why we decided to move away and redeploy those resources and dollars in another direction, because really our hands were tied with how these officers were used and how they were selected and the feedback that we would give about the way in which they treated students and community members. So.
Does anyone else have any comments related to the hiring of school resource deputies?
Okay. For us, we had the opportunity here to actually interview our SROs prior to coming on board. So they gave us that opportunity. So you know what, just like everybody's concerned here, you know what, you do have to have the right person for any job, but you know what, for whose officer's job is to, safety and protection of us, of, the community, they get certain training to do that. But in order to be on our campus, they, like us as school staff, we get specific training to serve our student population, whether it be in academics, or meeting their social emotional needs, whatever the case might be. Same thing with our officers. The officers, they need that extra training to be able to, switch that hat, to be more, like I keep saying, that mentor. I think that the first person to ask that question, how make that statement about having bridging that gap between our law enforcement, and our community. And I think this is a great venue to do that for our students, to see the officers as a person, a real person, a person that they can connect to and let them know that they're here for their protection. So yes, absolutely. You know what, if you get the opportunity and if you guys are, to sit in that panel of interviewing those SROs who are going to be on your campus, I highly encourage you to do that, because ultimately they're going to be on your campus serving your students. So.
Sorry, I just want to add one quick thing, and that's really what I didn't hear today is elevating the voices of students. In Lynwood, we had a youth truth survey go out on the topic, and the results that we got sort of further underscored our need to move in different directions. So in every school district, in every school setting, students' voice should be uplifted and elevated, because they are really the people that we're there to serve. And absent their voice, we will be making the recommendations that might miss the proper nuance and miss issues that they might otherwise elevate. So I want to make sure that we, at every turn, elevate student voices in this topic as well. So I'm hoping at a later panel, this is not the last conference, that you all invite students to speak on the topic so we can understand what they need and see each and every day.
And Raquel, you're up next.
Hi, yes, Raquel Derfler. I'm calling in from the Antelope Valley. So I have a question to any of the panelists that feel that this is their area. I always find it always very curious when school district or folks that work at the school want to put forth having SRDs or SROs as mentors, that they have a mentorship type of role. I want to ask, why is that, and why are we not looking at other school personnel as being mentors or other outside community groups? Because I would just like to say, as a parent, I've never seen a mentor that carries a gun, because you just have that. It's not going to be an equal relationship between the student and someone who's sitting there with a gun. That person is always going to have all the power in that any type of interaction or relationship.
So I can answer briefly from a school district perspective, being on the school board. So the way I would say it is that no student learning happens absent relationship, right? That's a fact. That's data proven. Dr. Rita Pearson said it in her speech that's famous on the internet, and I really believe that students need to have someone that they can have rapport with, that they can learn from in order to really see the positive outcomes. So I'm one that believes that all students should have, like I mentioned earlier, an advocate on campus, mentors on campus. I don't necessarily think that it's married to the idea of having the SRO be that mentor on campus. Because communities like mine at Lynwood, who you may have heard in the news over the years, dealing with deputy gangs, racial profiling, and violence, have a different perspective about police. Even myself, I've been stopped like 4 or 5 times and never given a ticket, even to the point of being held at gunpoint for no reason. So to have a district focus on SROs that are school resource deputies being mentors can oftentimes subject students to trauma from their experiences, myself included. So I think it's important that districts look at, again, as I mentioned before, listen to student voice and understand what students are asking for and need for the outcomes that they want to see. So district needs to ask themselves, what are they in business to do? Is it to employ adults? Is it to satisfy adults' anxieties? Or is it to educate and build up strong young people in community? So with that perspective, that's the reason why I really am one that believes that mentors, while they may be non-traditional, are a necessity for education, and those mentors are really already on campus. But it has to be part of the campus culture to ensure that adults build positive relationships and mentorship with the students that they are interacting with. And that really just starts with from the campus monitors to the lunch lady to the bus driver to the teacher to whomever the students find as positive adults to provide that mentorship and that role model on the campus. So that's my belief. So I think a district needs to staff their school sites in alignment with their strategic plan, their mission and visions, and really not be reactive to situations, but also build a robust plan to respond to any type of emergency or any type of incident that they may see. And I think in doing that, you'll prevent sort of sending somebody that is seen as a trauma trigger for students to prepare the trauma that they're facing in the first place. So, that's just my opinion as a school board member. So.
I'll just piggyback off what just Gary mentioned. Absolutely. You know what? It goes back to the basic needs. Everyone needs a sense of belonging. I have a very similar background as Gary does. Just my life got turned around just like his did. Through a teacher and mentor. We all have that role here. I'm a school administrator. Sometimes I'm called upon to provide that discipline. And that's the worst part of my role. But you know what? If you could do it in a restorative way, it's a learning opportunity for these students. But yes, every single one of us, we do have our specific people who are, we work very closely with the AmeriCorps mentors. They're on our campus. I know I keep mentioning our school social workers, but we have 2 AmeriCorps mentors at every school campus, and that is their specific job, mentorship. When I say mentors, it's going back to that relationship building. If we want every single kid that's on our campus, if asked that question, is there somebody on your campus that you feel that cares about you, that's connected to you? If they say is that officer, well, more power to them, because we want every single student to have one adult on our campus that they feel connected to. And so that's what I mean when I say mentor. So all of us wear that hat on our campus. Like someone mentioned, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. Even though I wear a hat as administrator, I want students to look up to me and say, hey, my principal cares for me. You know, so we all wear that hat here. And same thing with our SRO. He wears that hat as well.
Thank you for that. And Raquel, did you have any additional questions?
No, just a little bit of a comment. I do appreciate everyone's work here that's on the panel, but like, and I kind of understand what you're saying about if a student chooses that officer as a mentor, but out here in the Antelope Valley, that's not going to be a thing. That really isn't, and that is how the school board tries to portray these officers. You heard the data about what happens, that they play chess with the child, that they are throwing a football, but the children that truly need that mentorship, they're not going to come within, 100 feet of that SRD because of what they've seen in community. And then once again, as a human, as a person, someone with a gun is always going to have the upper hand in any type of relationship. So I would just wish that school district would look for others that are already on the campus to fill that mentorship role. So thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. And next we have Janice. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to thank you guys for this event that you're having today. And I guess my question is more so related to having the school resource officers on the school campuses. I think my question relates to the parents, the students, us knowing that they're there. Not everybody seems to know that they're there all the time. So I know in the beginning, of the school year, we get a lot of papers from the school saying, sign this, sign that, sign this. And I don't know if we get anything about, the school resource officers being there. And you go on the website for the school, I don't see anything saying school resource officers are there. I don't know what they do. What type of communication could be done better? And I'll take my answer offline. Thank you.
So I'll just answer this. So from my perspective as a school member, again, one of the most important features of a district is communication and engagement with the community, especially with parents. I mentioned before the need to uplift the voices of students, and the same is true about uplifting what is happening on the school campus and inviting resources. And creating opportunities for feedback, like Cesar mentioned in his presentation. So a district, in theory, should be having orientations at the top of the school year and talking about what's happening on the school campus, what to expect from the school, and also expectations for students and families. So that's not happening. I would recommend reaching out to your district leadership, to your principals and admins at your student school to understand where the gap in communication is. Sometimes, not to give the district a sort of an out, sometimes it's an issue of the district not having the most up-to-date contact information for parents. So it's important that folks are updating their information as far as contact and whatever data information system your district has so that they can properly communicate to you. My daughter is a Lynwood student, and we have a couple of ways we communicate to our parents. So I get information from my superintendent, and then it's also backed up information from the school automatically. So I would say, again, it's important that students build rapport with community, with students, with parents to ensure that they are aware of what's happening, because really parents should be partners in education, not sort of a byproduct. So it's what we should do with parents, not just about parents. So I think that's what I would say. So again, depending on where you are in AV or wherever you may live, I would reach out to that school and ensure that you're getting all the up-to-date information, and make sure that your information to the school as far as contact is updated as well.
Thank you. And do any of the other panelists have additional information or comments about communication to parents about the program in general? Any last comments before we wind it up and turn it back to Commissioner Garcia?
I talk too much, but I'll go ahead and just add, absolutely. You know what? Now that you bring up that question, I actually wrote it on my things to do here, because you know what? You're absolutely right. I do a very poor job in that. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because we need to do a better job. We do. We need to do a better job letting know, because we do a great job announcing all the services and resources that we have on campus. And you know what? I see our SRO as a resource, and we definitely will need to communicate that, and and what is their role, because I mean everybody knows what all of us do, and we I take the blame on that one. I do a very poor job on letting others know, our parents especially, what our SRO does here on our campus. So thank you for bringing that up.
I also
just want
think
to
it's, oh, sorry. I also think it's really critical for, oh my gosh, Jaime, I'm so sorry. I'll go. I think it's really critical for students and families to be aware of their constitutional rights if they have law enforcement on campuses. That so often is not communicated, and so parents and students are not aware of what their rights are in schools when they're being searched, when they're being questioned, when they're being detained. And so I think for districts who have contracts with the sheriff's department, that should be information that is affirmatively shared.
And I was just going to add, I think it's really important also that there's mechanisms in place that schools contact parents when their child has a law enforcement contact or referral. One of the parts of the investigation was a telephone survey I did of families in the Antelope Valley. Spoke to several parents who were not aware that their child had been handcuffed by an SRO until later on, had been referred to SROs. So I think that's also very critical. If schools are going to use these individuals through either discipline or for law enforcement purposes on their campuses, it needs to clearly follow the mandates of law in terms of notifying parents when their child has been referred to law enforcement.
Thank you. And that does conclude the Q&A portion. So Commissioner Garcia, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, thank you. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts, and to the community members for tuning into this important conversation hosted by the Civilian Oversight Commission. We hope you can join us for the final session on deputies in schools this Thursday, August 3rd from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. This session will concentrate on ensuring outcomes and accountability. Please visit our website at coc.lacounty.gov to register for these sessions and to provide written public comment on the topic. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. This concludes our conference.